I gave the house to Mom. If you oppose, I'll divorce you. Suddenly, those were the words I was hit with from Ryan. I never heard about buying a house for your mother. Where did you get that kind of money anyway? I asked, and Ryan just smirked. I'm selling your dad's vacation home. That'll get us $400,000. Selling my deceased father's beloved vacation home? How could he decide that on his own? I was furious. But then Ryan shouted either that or divorce. I felt my anger cooling down. Fine, got it. I won't let you or your family insult mine anymore. I muttered. Huh, so you're saying divorce is the only option? You okay with that? Ryan asked as if playing his trump card. But I firmly responded. You'll regret it, you know? I won't. With that, Ryan laughed loudly, looking all confident. However, just 2 months later, he would appear before me, looking like a shadow of his former self. My name is Catherine Miller, 50 years old. I got married at 45, and it felt like a miracle at the time. After all, I was quite plain-looking, not particularly outgoing, and generally unnoticeable. I met my husband Ryan at our workplace. I worked in the accounting department, and he had just transferred to the sales department. I had to visit the sales department due to an invoice error. Ryan Miller, who was 32 at the time, corrected the mistake without any fuss, saying, "Oops." He then looked at me and laughed innocently. You're pretty kind, Miss Taylor. The other accountants scolded me pretty hard the other day. My maiden name was Taylor. Seeing Ryan's friendly smile and his handsome face, I felt he was from a different world than mine. Yet for some reason, he became fond of me, a woman 10 years his senior, and started greeting me every time we crossed paths at the office. The first time he asked me out for drinks, I was surprised that a man would be interested in someone like me. As time passed, we got closer and started dating. Some said I was being fooled, but I was genuinely drawn to his carefree nature. About 2 years into our relationship, Ryan quit and joined a different company. When I asked why, he said, "My current boss is too strict. I want to work more freely." I felt it was a bit immature, but I was indulgent with him. "I hope you find a better boss at your next job," was all I said. And a few months later, we got married. I was 45, and Ryan was 35. I never thought I'd marry someone 10 years younger. My dad, overjoyed by the news of our marriage, offered to cover the entire wedding cost, leading to a grand ceremony. Although I felt a simple wedding would have sufficed at 45, he wouldn't listen. Ryan's mom was single at the time, having divorced his dad. It seemed she felt her role was done when Ryan got his first job, and my father-in-law was the one who initiated the divorce. I didn't know the reason back then, but I would come to understand it firsthand later. Because of these circumstances, we didn't expect any financial help from Ryan's side for the wedding. Once Ryan and I started living in our apartment, his mom, perhaps feeling lonely, began visiting us frequently. It wasn't a bother, but she would always bring expensive desserts with her. "Ryan, look, it's your favorite, right? I bought a bunch, so eat up." My mother-in-law opened her own gift and placed it on the table, but as expected, nothing was set in front of me. Every time she visits, she'd beeline straight to Ryan and converse only with him. It's as if I don't even exist. The rare times she does look my way, she'd make snide remarks like, "I wonder why Ryan married such an older, unattractive woman like you," or "Oh, how gloomy this room is despite the sunny weather. Must be because you're here, Catherine." And most times she stays for dinner, she'd criticize every dish I serve. "What's this? Cheap-looking meat? Ryan's in his prime, you know? You should serve better quality meat." Even if she says so, I can't afford to serve premium meat every day. Every time I place a dish on the table, she'd mumble about how cheap it looks, yet she'd devour everything and leave, which baffles me. Though single and unemployed, I always wondered how she could afford such luxury. One day, I was shocked when I updated a long-neglected bank book under Ryan's name. The balance was 0. "Ryan, what did you spend all this money on?" I confronted Ryan, but he just stared blankly at the bank book showing a 0 balance. I remember his father had painstakingly saved a considerable sum, hundreds of thousands of dollars, for Ryan before their divorce. Yet, it was all gone in a few months. "I think Mom probably used it," Ryan muttered. "What? Your mother? Why would she use your money without permission?" I exclaimed, and he just sighed deeply. Well, maybe she's struggling for money since she's single. No way. Regardless, she spent way too much. I protested, but Ryan suddenly glared at me. Enough. Don't badmouth Mom. You really are a cold woman. With that, he locked himself in his room. I was stunned by Ryan's sudden change. Later, I found out that one of the reasons his parents divorced was due to his mother's reckless spending. After that, I directly told my mother-in-law not to use our money and started monitoring her actions. She constantly complained, calling me a miserable and spiteful daughter-in-law, but if it meant our finances wouldn't be drained, I didn't care. Ryan wasn't pleased either, but if she kept spending like water, we'd soon be bankrupt. We both work, but we still have mortgage payments for our apartment. 2 years later, a new issue arose. Ryan was having an affair. He often came home late from work and lied about working weekends. Suspicious, I hired a detective agency and discovered Ryan's affair with a younger colleague. When I confronted him, instead of apologizing, he got defensive. How dare you hire a detective? If you have that kind of money, you should have spent it on Mom. You're really the worst. That's not the point, Ryan. You had an affair. Admit it. I pressed, and he just scoffed. What if I did? I settled for a dull, unattractive woman like you. Can't blame me for straying once or twice. Once or twice. Are there others? Shut up. Keep this up, and I'm gonna divorce you. What divorce? Seeing my shocked reaction, Ryan seemed to think he'd gained the upper hand. He smirked and stood up. If you don't like it, then keep your mouth shut. But honestly, even if I stray, I'll always come back to you. You should be grateful. With that, he left the room. Confronting Ryan about his affair, I couldn't get even a single word of apology. Instead, he seemed to mock me, and this broke my heart, making me cry for days. But when he mentioned divorce, I couldn't stand up to him. If I divorced, I'd be alone for the rest of my life. The only person who ever wanted to marry someone like me was Ryan. With that thought, I couldn't say anything about his actions anymore. 3 years went by, and I turned 50. That year, my father was diagnosed with colon cancer. By the time they found it, it was already advanced and in its final stages. My mother and I took turns staying by his bedside, caring for him. Though weakened, my father's gentle demeanor remained unchanged, and we were able to spend some peaceful moments together. However, being the CEO of a large corporation, business associates would visit him daily to pay their respects. Every time they did, it seemed to drain him even more. Strangely, during all this, Ryan visited frequently. Even though he had never been fond of visiting my parents since we got married, his sudden change of heart surprised me. Please stay strong, sir. It'll break Catherine's heart if you don't. You need to live a long life, Ryan would say to him. I sometimes couldn't believe my ears hearing these words from Ryan. But my father seemed to be thankful for him. Thank you, Ryan, for marrying my shy daughter, Catherine. With a bright man like you by her side, I'm sure she's happy. I had to bite my tongue hearing such words. Do you think we can visit that vacation home this year? My father would ask. My father owned a vacation home in Malibu. When I was single, our family of 3 used to visit frequently. But since my marriage, I stopped going because Ryan wasn't keen on spending time with my parents there. Apparently, my parents still visited annually. Why don't I leave that house to you, Ryan? When I'm gone, can you take Catherine there every year? Tears welled up in my father's eyes as he said this, but Ryan shook his head. Please don't talk like that, sir. It's bad luck. After a brief pause, Ryan continued. I promise. If anything were to happen, I'll take good care of that property. Looking straight into Ryan's eyes, my father nodded in gratitude. But just a few weeks later, my father passed away. While my mother and I were drowning in sorrow, Ryan suddenly dropped a bombshell. I've given the house to Mom. If you oppose it, we're gonna divorce. I was in shock. I never heard anything about buying a house for your mother. Besides, where'd you get that kind of money? With a smirk, Ryan replied. I'm selling your father's vacation home. I'll get $400,000 from it. I couldn't believe what Ryan was suggesting. You promised to take care of that place. Even if I don't want to go there every year, what about my mother? That place means a lot to her. But Ryan just chuckled. I never said I was gonna keep that promise. Thanks to that, your father left me the house in his will. Now I can finally give Mom something nice. What kind of guy are you? I felt my body trembling with anger. All this time, he would go on about mom, making himself out to be such a mama's boy. But now, I have to admit he's nothing more than a creepy mama's boy. But the next words out of Ryan's mouth made me doubt my own ears. Mom's gonna get remarried. What? That's why I'm setting up a house for her and her new husband. From what I gathered, his mother had made this request. The house they had been living in was old, and she didn't want to be reminded of memories with her late husband. So, she wanted to start fresh in a new home and had asked Ryan to help. You must be kidding. Why do we have to provide a home for your mother and her new husband? In near hysteria, I retorted. But Ryan was deaf to my objections. That's what you call respecting your parents. I felt my blood run cold. All right, I get it. I won't tolerate any more insults from you or your family. I muttered to myself. Well then, looks like we got no choice but to divorce, huh? You okay with that? Ryan said, playing what seemed like his trump card. But I firmly declared. That's fine, but you'll regret it. At my words, a surprised expression crossed Ryan's face for a moment. But he quickly reverted to his insolent grin. Don't think so. He laughed heartily. Don't act so tough. It's not an act. I'm done being manipulated by you and your mother. The condo is in your name, so good luck with the remaining mortgage payments. I'm moving out. I said, and within a few days, I packed up and left the condo. 2 months after our divorce was finalized. And thanks to the inheritance from my father, I had no issues relocating and settling into a new place. Although I rented, the apartment was spacious enough for one. Just as I was getting accustomed to my new surroundings, Ryan showed up at my door. Catherine! I've been looking everywhere for you. It had been a while since I saw Ryan, and he looked worn out, sweating profusely. What do you want? We have no ties anymore. Before I could stop him, he barged into my apartment, shouting. Where did you hide your father's will? Saying that, Ryan started searching around my room. Hey, don't just barge in and make a mess. I'll call the cops. Your dad wrote a will right in front of me, didn't he? Saying he'd leave me that vacation house in Malibu. I can't find that will anywhere. Oh, that will? I've discarded it. What? Ryan lunged at me, growling. What the hell did you do? I didn't destroy it, my father did. What do you mean? While battling a severe illness, my father had painstakingly written that will. But after Ryan left, I had revealed everything that Ryan and my mother-in-law had done to him. Turns out, Ryan had been cheating all the time, and my mother-in-law had been spending money recklessly, even using up all of Ryan's bank savings. Moreover, they'd frequently been asking us for money. I didn't want to distress my father, but I just couldn't trust Ryan and decided to tell the truth. My father felt remorseful for not realizing my situation earlier, but I assured him with a smile. Dad, I'll be fine. I used to fear being alone, but I'd rather be on my own than to be constantly belittled by people like them. Besides, everyone deserves a second chance. Hearing that, my father smiled and said, You've become strong, Catherine. Later, he drafted a proper will and stored it at the town hall. So, the property is now under my mom's name, and there's no way you can sell it. Upon hearing this, Ryan's face went pale, and he collapsed to his knees. Why? I need the money from selling that vacation house. And what's that? For the house you were gonna buy for your mother? Then earn the money yourself. And if you're going to buy a new $400,000 house while still paying off the mortgage for the condo, well, you're such a devoted son, aren't you? It's truly admirable. When I mentioned this, Ryan mumbled in a low voice. I can't even afford the mortgage for my own condo. What? I asked again, but Ryan remained silent. I had seen this coming ever since we'd decided to divorce. Perhaps because Ryan was coddled by his mother his whole life, he had a very fragile mentality. He struggled with work, often becoming overwhelmed quickly. At his job, he could only handle minor tasks, and even when his boss merely advised him to work more efficiently, he'd get sick and take time off. Consequently, he'd end up quitting every new job he took and hop from one job to another. To add insult to injury, he had a wandering eye when it came to women, Truly a bad combination. You're probably taking time off from work again, aren't you? I asked. In a low voice, Ryan responded. Well, actually, I quit my job last month and haven't found a new one yet. I'm flabbergasted. Considering his current situation, it's audacious for him to think he could buy a new house for his mother and manage the mortgage after divorcing me. In reality, when we lived together, I had been covering almost all of our living expenses, from the mortgage to everyday costs. Come on, Catherine, can't you come back to me? You must be lonely in this place all by yourself, right? Let's face it, you don't have friends, and no guy would ever be interested in you in the future. Let's stop this charade and start over. That's a joke, right? I shouted, pushing the approaching Ryan away. You think I'm lonely just because I'm alone? Don't make assumptions about me. I'm not going back to that life with you and your mother. Just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. Catherine, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but I've never felt more free and happy in my life. I can go wherever I want, whenever I want, and do what I love. No one to belittle or mock me. You're nothing more than a pest to me. Get out. But Catherine, if you abandon me, Even as he tried to cling to me, I gave him a cold stare. You were always good at fooling women. Remember your mistress? Why don't you ask her for help? Oh, that woman? She left me when she realized I had no money. She's really something, huh? Who's the real problem here? I bet you approached me for my money in the first place, right? I remember when we were at the same company, you were always so curious about my family's background. I remember when I first met Ryan. Every time we met at the company, he would skillfully ask about my family. Now, looking back, I realize how odd it was, but back then, I was so smitten that I didn't notice. I truly feel I was such a fool. Listen, when I took out the mortgage for the new house, I borrowed some money from a not-so-great source. I planned to repay it immediately, so I didn't care much about the interest. But now, if I can't pay it back, the debt collectors are on me every day. And because of that, I'm getting complaints from other condo residents. You really are an idiot. I was just astounded at how Ryan kept making things worse for himself. But I had no sympathy for him. By the way, how about your mom's new husband? He could pay for the new house, right? It's their home to live in after her remarriage, so it should be an issue to be settled between his mom and her new husband. But Ryan said, actually, he's not working either. Plus, my mom, wanting to feel young since her new husband is 20 years younger, went for plastic surgery. Plastic surgery? She was planning to pay for the surgery with the money from selling our vacation home. But that plan fell through, so the surgery got halted midway. When her new husband saw her in that state, he took off. What a pair, this mother and son. Both digging their own graves, it's just unbelievable. It's awful, right? To leave my mom when she's struggling. Your mom has her own problems, choosing such a man. Planning to live in a house someone else built, and he's not even working. Really, what a terrible choice for a second husband. Well, with a mother-in-law like that, who else would be attracted to her? As I was internally shaking my head, someone appeared at my house. It was my mother-in-law, her face wrapped in bandages. She entered without asking, approaching me aggressively. Catherine, you're not planning to abandon my son, are you? Because of you, both my son and I are in a tough spot. You better sell that vacation home and give us the money. What happened to your face? Huh? Because you've been so stingy and not selling the vacation home, my nose surgery got halted. That doctor, once he realized there was no money, just skipped town on me. What? How could this happen? So she got duped by that doctor too? Just disappearing once he realized she couldn't pay? I want to get my face fixed by another doctor, but I have no money and don't know what to do. Hey, Catherine. It's your responsibility to help us out. You inherited a good amount of money, didn't you? Hand it over to us. Faced with such an outrageous demand, I was in shock. Enough of this. Are you trying to extort me? If you keep this up, I'll call the police on you for trespassing and threats. My raised voice startled my bandaged mother-in-law, making her flinch. How dare you yell at an elderly woman in her frail state? You're such a disgraceful daughter-in-law. I couldn't believe she still thought of my place as hers. Listen. I have no intention of ever dealing with money grubbers like you. You and your failed excuse of a son there have no choice but to live with the massive debt you've accumulated. If you think someone else is gonna clean up the mess you've made, you're sorely mistaken. And by the way, as I spoke, she looked at me fearfully. What is it? I have proof of Ryan cheating on me. During our marriage, I was the one who suffered mentally. I haven't forgiven him for that. I'm gonna sue both of you and take you for all you're worth, so be prepared. Hearing this, both of their faces turned pale. I pointed to the door, addressing both of them. If you get it, then stay away from me for good. If you try to approach me again, I'll call the police. With that, both Ryan and my mother-in-law, scared out of their wits, hurriedly left through the front door. I later found out that Ryan and his mother had to give up their new home. Despite that, they're still being hounded by debt collectors since they borrowed money from shady lenders. Ryan couldn't hold down the next job he found and is now working part-time to make ends meet. With his income, he couldn't pay off the condo's mortgage, so he had to give it up. Now, the two of them live together in a rundown apartment, exposed to the elements. My mother-in-law still hasn't found a doctor to fix her nose and keeps complaining about how cold air makes her nose hurt. This was all information given to me by the attorney I hired. So, even if you seek compensation now, I don't think you'll get anything back. That's okay. Just make the claim. I just want to push them to their limits mentally, I said with a smile as I asked my attorney. Later on, I became a certified financial planner and started my own practice. I now consult women struggling with issues like my ex-husband's emotional abuse and difficult relationships with their in-laws, helping them navigate financial challenges during divorce considerations. During this journey, I met a man who understood and genuinely needed my work. He reminded me of my late father, a kind-hearted and gentle man. Spending time with him, I realized what true happiness feels like. You see, there's no rush. There's no need to undervalue yourself. Because you never know when or how you might meet someone special. At this age, I feel like I've finally found my own form of happiness.